Alright, so welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for coming back by, checking out what I have going on. As you guys know, I took a break in the beginning of January, which quickly spiraled out of control and turned into a month-long break, which ended up being much needed. And I'm very grateful that I took that time to relax and kind of gather my thoughts together for what I wanted to do on my YouTube channel and obviously figure out how I'm gonna fix this thing. So anyways, in this video, we're gonna be working on the Comanche, we're gonna be working on the floor pans, and we're gonna get it knocked out. So I did a lot of research before starting on this project, and I found that there's a lot of information that's missing when it comes down to replacing floor pans. So I wanted to have a video that had every tip and trick and everything you need to know when replacing floor pans on your Jeep XJ or Jeep Comanche. So this will be the ultimate guide to how to replace your floor pans. But real quick, before we get started, I want to thank everybody that's subscribed, that's commented, that's liked all my videos. I'm super humbled every time I look at the channel and see all of the positive response that I've gotten, and I couldn't be more grateful. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in and following along on this journey. And I hope you guys are all having a great year. I hope your 2024 has started out great, that you're out there exploring, working on your projects, and doing all those great things that make this off-road community awesome. Anyways, let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it, and I'll show you what I've learned. All right, so if you're new to this channel, this is my 1987 Jeep Comanche sport truck. So I picked this up, it was abandoned, left in a field to rot, definitely junkyard bound, and I picked it up for a great deal and decided I'm gonna turn it into a full-blown rock crawler. We're talking 1 tons, 40-inch tires, exo cage, everything. But way before we get to those fun, awesome upgrades, we've had a lot of work that needs to get done. So as you can see here, I've already fully completed the passenger side floor pan, and it took a lot to get to this point. I've never replaced floor pans before, so I took my time, learned all the tips and tricks, and that's what I'm gonna be showing you guys today. All right, so if there is one thing that I could say that is most important when replacing floor pans, it is taking your time prepping the area. So there is a lot of information out there on how to weld sheet metal, how to replace floor pans. And what I've come to find out is the more time you take prepping the area, the better your outcome. So if you just fly through it, yeah, you get it done quick, but you might be back to this same issue again later down the road. And you don't want to have to replace your floor pans more than once. So I recommend taking your time, prepping, and doing everything you can to make it look as best as possible. All right, so since this is a Jeep Comanche, there is quite a bit more prep work before you can replace the floor pans. So as you can see here, there's this long brace in this one here that goes to the door jamb here. So all of this needs to be removed. It's all spot welded in, so all that has to be cut out. On the other side over there, it was rusty in the back. I had to make my own patch panel. So I expect to find some rust back here that needs to be repaired. So what we're gonna do right off the bat is we're going to drill out all these spot welds and remove this bracing. All right, so if you're watching this video to replace the floor pans on your Jeep Cherokee, you'll have some of these. So these are the seat brackets that cut across. So you'll have to drill out all the spot welds and remove these before you can get to cutting out the floor pan and prepping it for the new one. So before I get started on cutting out the floor pans or doing any of this this project here, I want to show you the tools that I'll be using. So I have a little tiny detail sander, belt sander. I use a jigsaw, angle grinder. I do have a small orbital sander, sawzall, and then obviously some drills with some wire brushes. But these are the main tools I'll be using pretty much throughout this whole process. I think my favorite tool probably is definitely the belt sander. I bought this a while back off Amazon, and It's been very useful in all kinds of applications, and it's super nice to get in those tight corners on the floor pans to grind down welds. So I'll put a link down in the description for that. It's been a lifesaver, and especially these other belts too, these sanding belts. So I'll have links down in the description of this. So if you want to pick one of those up for yourself, the link will be down there. Before I forget, I want to show you what I have here. So these are the spot weld drill bits that I used, as well as the weld through primer. These have been a game changer. I definitely would highly recommend picking some up before you get started on your own floor pans. These have saved me a ton of time and made the whole process a lot smoother. So I put the links down in the description. I purchased these off Amazon. I'm also an Amazon affiliate, so using my link down below will help me out. All right, so one last thing before we get started on cutting out all of this old material. Please hit that like button and please comment down below what you think of my process for replacing the floor pan. Also, if you've done your own floor pans in the past, let me know what you did. If you did something similar or if you did something completely different, I'm curious. I would like to know what other people do to replace their floor pans. Anyways, if you're also new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'm gonna have tons of awesome content this year, and I don't want anybody to miss out on any of this. And I'm super excited. This is gonna be a crazy year for the channel. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Anyways, let's get to cutting out this stuff. All right, so I got this first little cross brace out. It came out way easier than that other side did now that I understand how it all comes apart and where all the spot welds are. So I definitely recommend, like I said before, taking your time, find all the spot welds, and be careful. This metal's thin, it's easy to bend. So if you take your time, everything will come out pretty easily. So one little note, so it's important, as I just reaffirmed to myself, that you should be wearing safety glasses and all of the protective equipment that you have. That way you don't have any mishaps. So as I was cutting this, as you saw, my my cutoff wheel broke, and yeah, I'm lucky I didn't get hurt, but I was wearing safety glasses, a respirator, ear protection, all of that stuff. So definitely don't forget your safety equipment. All right, so I'm gonna continue removing this other brace here. I won't waste your time. I'm just gonna be using that spot weld drill bit the whole time, as well as the cutoff wheel. We'll get this brace out, and then I'll show you how it all looks and what needs to happen in order to replace the floor pans. All right, so it's the next day. I got a ton done last night, so I'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. But today's main goal is to get the floor pan sitting flat on the frame rails. So there's a lot of cutting, a lot of old rusty floor pan material that needs to be removed. So I'll go over each step as we get to them, but there's gonna be a lot of work, so let's not waste any time. All right, so here's all the floor bracing that I was able to get removed last night. It takes quite a bit of time to drill out all of the spot welds and get everything removed. Definitely is not the easiest thing, especially when it's super rusty like this. So what I ended up doing is trying to knock down some of that rust so I could see the spot welds. And then as I pry it up, I drill the spot welds out at the same time. Anyways, the best thing to do is just take your time, and it'll all come out. But you can see here, lots of cleanup still to do. I even already set in the new floor pan and kind of marked out where it goes. So I kind of have an idea of the area I need to be working on. So I was thinking about it, and I forgot to mention what floor pans I'm using. So while I was doing all the research on this whole process, I came across these Key Parts floor pans. And from what I understand, they fit the best out of all the other options. These are advertised as Jeep Mopar replacement pans. So they don't make Jeep Comanche floor pans. So you have to use Jeep Cherokee floor pans, which isn't a big deal since the inside of this is super close to a Jeep Cherokee anyways. So it's not that bad. Just you have to do a little more massaging to get these to fit correctly. So what I'll do is I'll put the links down in the description. So if you're interested in picking these up for yourself, they'll be there. The links will be to the Quadratech website. That's where I purchased these. I'm not sure if they're cheaper elsewhere, but they came pretty quick. I didn't have any issues with the packaging, so they've been great so far. All right, so before we can get started on cutting out the old floor pan material, we need to talk about a few things. So the original floor pan, as you can see here, is all one piece with the transmission tunnel, with the back of the floor here. And then up front here, it overlaps with the firewall, and then it overlaps along the side here where it connects to the rocker panel. So that's how I installed the passenger one. I butt welded along the transmission tunnel and the floor here. And then I spot welded along the firewall and the rocker panel side. And then obviously spot welds for the frame rail here in the middle. So the best thing to do is to lay in the new floor pan, mark it out, and then what I did is I cut about an inch lower than my line. That way I didn't have big holes to fill later. And then I cut the floor in the transmission tunnel to match the floor pan later. So along the firewall here and along the side, but I mean the rust took care of most of it, there is this seam sealer. So what I've been doing to remove the seam sealer is I've been using a putty knife and a hammer. You can wedge it underneath it and hammer it away, and it comes off pretty easily. I've also been using a razor blade as well. So under this seam sealer, there are some spot welds that we need to take care of. So we'll get all that removed so we can drill out those spot welds. Something I was thinking about while editing the video is when you're in the process of removing all of the old rusty material, be prepared for it to make a huge mess. Everything in my garage is coated with rust dust, and I'm glad I was wearing my respirator throughout this whole process. So I definitely recommend being aware of that and being prepared for a big mess. All right, so actually now it's the next day. So I ended up putting the camera down so I could focus on what I was doing. When you're replacing floor pans, it's super labor intensive. You're putting the floor pan in, you're taking it out, you're cutting, you're grinding, you're trying to get that fitment just right so everything looks correctly. So that's what I did yesterday. I took a lot of time to really get the fitment right. There are still a few little things that we need to do in order to have a perfect perimeter for it to be welded to the main body. So that's what we're going to be doing this morning. I'm going to turn the camera around here, show you what I did, explain how I did it, and give you a few tips along the way. This is how far I made it yesterday. I got this sitting nice and flat, and really the trick here is to use self-tappers. So I use self-tappers along the frame rail, get it massaged into place. You can see here where I was hitting it with a hammer. You are gonna have to do some trimming, especially in the Comanche. So I've trimmed it there and here as well. And then, yeah, I've kind of had to massage it in certain places. There'll be some more bending here of the factory floor to get it to line up with these grooves. But so far it's turning out really nice, about the same as the other side. It's gonna be a rock crawler, so I'm not trying to turn this into a perfect show car or anything like that. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this fitment so far. All right, so if you're working on something as rusty as this, you're gonna have other spots that need attention. So I went through here with a paint marker, marked it up. So these ones with the circles will just get some spot welds over the top, and then it'll be ground down. And then here, I'm gonna build a couple little small patch panels. This was under the original bench seat, so I'm not sure what was happening here. Something was rubbing the floor. So we'll fix that up too, make some patch panels. And then as well, since this is a Cherokee floor, there are some holes here. So I'm gonna cut some circles out and we'll patch those as well. One thing I learned when I was doing this passenger side is how flimsy the factory unibody is. So I had a lot of issues right along this seam here on the rocker panel side, where as I was removing the bracing, everything was bending super easily. So I needed some way to flatten this out. So I had a good surface to spot weld the floor pan to. So what I ended up doing is I hole sawed a couple holes in the outside here so I could use a pry bar and a hammer to straighten that back out. I'm not worried about the rocker panel since I am gonna be installing 2x6 rock sliders here that'll be welded to the body. So I just drilled a couple 1-inch holes, used a hammer and a pry bar, and I was able to straighten it out. So I'll show you here on the driver's side, but it's a lot worse. The driver's side has been in an accident, so we need to do a lot more straightening. Here's where it was in the accident on the driver's side. So this lower section of the rocker is all smashed in, and you can see there's been some rippling on the inside right here. It's all kind of tweaked right through here, and I have a pretty good little gap that we need to fix. So just like the passenger side, I'm gonna drill some holes in the outside, use a hammer and a pry bar, and we'll get that all straightened out. It doesn't have to be super pretty, but I do need a good surface to weld to, so that's what we're gonna be doing next. All right, so final fitment is now complete. So what I'm gonna end up doing on this side that's different from the other side is I'm actually gonna spot weld the whole perimeter of this side. On the passenger side, I just did spot welds along that flanged area, but it's not as flat on this side, and I got the gap pretty closed up. So it'll just look better overall if I perimeter weld the whole thing. But anyways, so next up is I need to remove this. We'll get all the holes drilled for the spot welds. We'll get everything cleaned up, ready to go in, and then I'll show you what I have planned next. All right, so I got everything fully painted with that weld through primer. That weld through primer is super awesome. It dries to the touch in 15 minutes. So if you're in a bind or if you're trying to rush through this on a weekend and you need to get it done, that weld through primer is definitely a must have. It makes this job a lot easier and you don't have to worry about rust down the line. Anyway, so up next, I'm gonna get the floor pan fitted back up again, get those self tappers installed, and then we'll start welding this in. So a big thing about welding this is that unibody material is super thin, especially where there's been rust. So you're gonna wanna take your time with it. You're gonna do a million tack welds all the way around. It's time consuming, but that's what has to happen in order to make this look right. So I recommend just taking it slow and you'll be able to get through it just fine. Anyways, I'm gonna get the camera set up and we'll get to welding this in. Finally, all of the welding is complete. The driver's floor pan is completely welded in and it turned out really great. Welding floor pans is very time consuming. You'll be sore afterwards, but the results are definitely worth it. Welding thin sheet metal will definitely test your skills as a welder as well as your patience. You'll find as you go and as the metal heats up, it'll start to blow through. Then you'll have to jump around and weld other areas while some areas are cooling and then kind of come back to those as you go. But it turned out really nice. I'm very proud of this. And I also patched these other rust holes that I had. There was a couple little small holes right through here that I welded up. But everything turned out great. It's definitely time to move on to the next step. There are a few tips and tricks that I've been thinking about, so we'll go over those real quick and then we'll move into the next thing. So one quick tip, so when you're welding, it's really important that you use those self-tapping screws to help you get this to sit as flush to the frame rail as possible. So what I did is I started here in the middle and I worked my way towards the firewall, and I used those self-tapping screws to pull it down flush, and I double checked underneath the vehicle to make sure everything was really close and there wasn't big gaps that I was needing to deal with. So that was definitely a huge game changer as far as getting this to sit right, and it gives you a nice place to weld those spot welds down the center. Okay, so we're on the home stretch. We're ready for the next steps here. So the next step is going to be grinding down all of the welds with a flap disc, and then I'll come back through with the detail sander and get everything all nice and smooth and looking great. And then what I do is I take a flashlight and I stick my hand through the gear shift hole here, and I'll shine that flashlight on the welds from the backside. That way I can spot any pinholes that I might have created or areas that I missed. I'll circle all those with a paint marker and then come back through with a welder and patch all that stuff up. And then once those are patched, I'll sand them down again, double check again for pinholes. And as long as there's no pinholes, I'll sand everything down and lay down some primer. Okay, so I got all of the welds ground down where I wanted to grind them down. There are some welds here along the rocker panel and the firewall that I'm not worried about. All of that will get covered up with seam sealer. So what I've gone ahead and done already is I went through with a flashlight and I circled all of the places where there are pinholes, and I also drilled out where the transfer case, shift linkage stuff is gonna go. But as you can see here, I got a light set up underneath. You can see where all those pinholes are. Some of them aren't quite as visible as others, but we'll get the welder out, we'll go through, and we'll patch all of these spots. So that's what's up next. We'll get those patched, ground down. We'll double check once again for pinholes, and that'll wrap it up for the floor pan on the driver's side. Man, does it feel good to have the floor pans 100% done. It's so nice not seeing big rusty holes in the floors, and starting to shape up. I'm excited for the next repairs and the next things that we're going to be doing to this thing. I just want to go over filling in the pinholes. It took a lot longer on the driver's side than the passenger side. I had a lot of issues with it blowing through because the metal's really thin here along the transmission tunnel. You can kind of see there I had to go over it several times in several spots, but it's all done now. There's no pinholes, and I went ahead and I sanded everything down and laid down some primer. Let me tell you though, I definitely don't want to have to replace floor pans ever again. It's not fun, but if I had to, now I know how, and I know all the little tips and tricks. All right, so that's gonna wrap it up for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you learned something about replacing floor pans, and if you're in the middle of this project for yourself, good luck. I know you can do it. Just take your time and it'll all turn out great. It's not an easy job by any means, and you're not the only one that struggles with welding thin sheet metal. So I know you can do it. Keep up the work. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to hit that like button, comment down below what you thought about the video. I'm sorry once again that I didn't have any content for January, but I have tons of stuff planned and it's gonna be an awesome year on the channel. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thank you again, once again. Get out there in your garage, work on your projects, go out there on the trails, and be safe out there.